Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Sovereign Dawn. His 4 arms crossed behind his back as he stared at the holographic display showing a small blue planet. Earth, the home of the humans. Admiral, his communications. Officer called out, "We have received their response to our ultimatum." Zextar's eyes narrowed. In his 300 years of service to the Galactic Empire, no species had ever taken more than a few hours to surrender. The humans had used their full 72 hours. This was already unusual. "Display it," he commanded. A message appeared on the main screen. It was short, just 3 words. "Come and take it." The bridge fell silent. Officers from 6 different conquered species stared at the message in disbelief. Zextar felt his blood pressure rising. In all his years, no one had ever dared to mock the Empire like this. "Are they serious?" asked Commander Vexhall, his second in command. "Apparently," Zextar replied. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. We will teach these humans the price of defiance." Far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command center of the Liberty Bell, Earth's primary defense station. The station orbited high above Earth, its sensors watching the empty space around the solar system. But Jake knew that emptiness would not last much longer. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Brooks called from her station, "we're getting reports from our deep space observers. The Empire's fleet just entered hyperspace. They're coming." Jake nodded calmly. He had been expecting this moment for 20 years. "How long until they arrive?" "Approximately 6 hours, sir." "Good. Send word to Admiral Carter. Tell her it's time to begin final preparations." On the surface of Earth, in the underground bunkers. Beneath Colorado, Admiral Lisa Carter reviewed the final intelligence reports. The Empire was bringing everything they had. 50,000 warships. Weapons that could crack planets. Warriors from dozens of different worlds. "Ma'am," her aide said nervously, "are you sure about this plan?" "The numbers don't look good." Lisa smiled. "The numbers never look good when you're fighting the Empire. That's why no one has ever beaten them before." "But ma'am," relaxed Lieutenant, "the Empire thinks they know everything about warfare. They're about to learn that humans fight differently." Above ground, in the great cities of Earth, something strange was happening. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly, but there was no panic. People moved to the underground shelters with calm determination. Children asked their parents questions about the aliens coming to fight them, and the adults answered with steady voices. Alex Turner, a news reporter, stood in Times Square as the last civilians disappeared into the subway tunnels that led to the deep shelters. He spoke into his camera with wonder. "I've covered wars and disasters for 15 years, he said, "but I've never seen anything like this. It's as if the entire planet has been preparing for this moment. There's no fear here. If anything, people seem almost excited." In space, the crew of the human frigate Defiant watched their sensors carefully. Captain Steve Baker had positioned his ship at the edge of the solar system, where they could observe the Empire's arrival without being seen. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting the first hyperspace signatures. They're bigger than we expected." Steve nodded. "How big?" "Some of those ships are the size of small moons, sir. I count at least 3 planet killers in the first wave." "Understood. Send the data to command. And remember, we're here to watch, not to fight." Not yet. Back on the Liberty Bell, Jake Morrison received the data from the Defiant and dozens of other observation posts. The Empire's fleet was massive beyond imagination. Any normal species would have surrendered immediately upon seeing such a force. But humans were not normal. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from the Empire fleet. It's for you personally." Jake smiled. "Put it through." Admiral Zextar's image appeared on the screen. The alien's face was a mixture of anger and confusion. "I am Admiral Zexstar of the Galactic Empire. You will surrender immediately or face complete annihilation." Jake leaned back in his chair. "Admiral, I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. I have a message for you from our government. Speak." "The message is simple. We decline your offer." Zexstar's eyes widened. "You decline? Do you understand what you face? We have conquered 400 star systems. We have weapons that can destroy your entire planet. Your species will be extinct within hours." "Maybe," Jake said calmly. "But we're going to make you work for it." The communication ended. On the Empire flagship, officers stared at each other, in shock. They had never encountered anything like this before. "Admiral," Commander Vexahal said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider. This level of confidence suggests they may have weapons we don't know about." Zexstar laughed harshly. "Impossible. Our intelligence is perfect. They have a few hundred ships at most. They're primitives clinging to a single world. Their confidence is just ignorance." But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered doubt. In 300 years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were telling him something was wrong. On Earth, Dr. Rachel Stone sat in her laboratory, reviewing the final preparations. As head of the Xenobiology Division, she had spent years studying the Empire's species. She knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their psychology. "The Empire has never lost a battle," she said to her assistant. "They don't even understand what losing means. That's going to be their greatest weakness." In the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Pluto, Commander Ben Rogers watched the Empire fleet emerge from hyperspace. The sight was terrifying. Thousands upon thousands of massive warships, their hull lights creating a second constellation in the darkness. "My God," whispered his sensor operator. "How are we supposed to fight that?" Ben smiled grimly. "We're not going to fight them. We're going to teach them." His fingers moved across his console, sending a coded message to every human ship and station in the solar system. The message was simple. Package delivered. The trap is set. Across the solar system, from the innermost planets to the farthest observation posts, humans received the message. In every ship, on every station, in every underground bunker, people smiled. The Empire had come to conquer them. But the Empire was about to learn that conquering humanity was not the same as conquering any other species. Humans had spent their entire history fighting each other, learning from every defeat, adapting to every challenge. Now they would face their greatest test, not as Americans or Chinese or Europeans, but as humans. One species, one mind, one purpose. The Empire's fleet moved deeper into the solar system, their sensors detecting the pathetic few hundred human ships that dared to oppose them. Admiral Zexstar felt his confidence returning. This would be over quickly. He had no idea that he was flying into the most carefully prepared trap in galactic history. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty Bell, watching the Empire's mighty fleet approach. His crew looked nervous, but Jake felt only calm determination. "All stations, this is Morrison," he said into his communicator. "Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to show the galaxy that freedom's worth any price. Let's give them a lesson they'll never forget. The trap was set. The Empire was coming, and humanity was ready." The Empire's fleet filled the space around Earth like a dark cloud. Admiral Zexstar stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. 50,000 warships in perfect formation. The sight had broken the will of every species they had ever encountered. "Look at them," he said to his officers. "So few ships, so small. They should be begging for mercy by now." Commander Vexhall studied the human fleet formations. "Admiral, their positioning is unusual. They're not trying to protect their planet. They're spread out across the entire solar system. Cowards, Zextar replied. They know they cannot win, so they scatter like frightened animals. It matters not. We will hunt them down one by one. On the human frigate Defiant, Captain Steve Baker watched the Empire's massive ships move into their attack formation. The formation was called the Hammer of Dominion, and it had never failed. The Empire's ships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Earth, with the largest ships at the center and smaller vessels forming protective layers around them. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, they're even bigger up close. That flagship must be 20 miles long. Steve nodded grimly. Size isn't everything, Lieutenant. Remember what they taught us in the academy. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. But even Steve felt a chill as he watched the Empire's weapons begin to charge. Energy readings off the scale. Weapons that could turn mountains into dust. Ships that had conquered entire star systems. Deep. In the Empire's fleet, General Kethfor of the Saurian hegemony addressed his warriors over the communication system. His people had ruled 200 worlds before the Empire conquered them, and they had never forgotten the taste of battle. Warriors, he roared. Today, we face the humans. They are weak, primitive creatures who have never left their single world. They know nothing of real war. We will show them why the Empire is supreme. His soldiers cheered, their battle cries echoing through the ship. The Saurians were proud warriors, and they looked forward to adding another victory to their long list of conquests. But on the stealth ship Ghost Protocol, Commander Ben Rogers was listening to every word. Human technology had cracked the Empire's communication codes years ago. The Empire had no idea that their every conversation was being recorded and analyzed. Interesting, Ben said to his communications officer. They're treating this like a standard conquest. No special preparations, no unusual tactics. They think we're just another primitive species. Isn't that good for us, sir? Ben smiled coldly. It's perfect. They have no idea what they're walking into. On Earth, Dr. Rachel Stone was in her laboratory, but she wasn't working on weapons or defenses. She was studying psychology. The Empire's greatest weakness wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their mindset. They've never lost, she explained to her research team. In 800 years of conquest, they've never faced a species that could adapt to their methods. They fight the same way every time because it always works. But what if it doesn't work this time? Asked her assistant. Then they'll panic. The Empire's entire structure is built on the idea that they're invincible. Take that away, and they'll collapse from within. Meanwhile, Admiral Lisa Carter was in the deep command bunker, coordinating with defense forces across the solar system. Her screens showed the positions of every human ship, every weapon platform, every hidden asset that the Empire couldn't detect. Status report, she called out. All sleeper units are in position, reported Colonel Amy Walsh. The Empire's sensors can't tell the difference between our drones and regular asteroids. Good. What about the factory ships? Hidden behind Jupiter and Saturn. They're producing ammunition and replacement parts around the clock. Lisa nodded. The Empire thought they were fighting a few hundred human ships. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this battle for decades. On the Empire flagship, Admiral Zextar was growing impatient. The humans should have surrendered by now. The sight of his fleet should have been enough to break their spirit. Send them another message, he ordered. Tell them this is their last chance to surrender. The message was transmitted to every human, ship and station in the solar system. It was simple. Surrender now or face annihilation. The response came from Captain Jake Morrison on the Liberty Bell. His image appeared on the Empire's main screen, and he was smiling. Admiral Zextar. Jake said calmly, We appreciate the offer, but we're going to have to pass. You see, we have a policy about bullies. We don't surrender to them." Zextar's face darkened. "You call the Empire bullies? We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy. We bring order to chaos, civilization to primitive worlds. You bring slavery." Jake replied, "You destroy cultures, enslave populations, and call it progress. We've seen what you did to the other species. We won't let you do it to us. Then you will die," Zextar snarled. "All of you. Your species will be extinct within the hour." Jake's smile never wavered. "Maybe, but we're going to make you remember this day for the rest of your lives." The communication ended. On the Empire flagship, officers from different species muttered among themselves. The humans' confidence was disturbing. It didn't make sense. "Admiral," said Commander Vexahol, "perhaps we should probe their defenses. First, this level of confidence suggests silence." Zextar roared, "I will not be lectured by primitives. Begin the attack. Target their orbital defenses first. Show them the power of the Empire." The first wave of Empire ships moved forward, their weapons charging. Energy beams that could melt steel began to glow along their hulls. The attack was about to begin, but on the human ships there was no panic. Crews went about their duties with calm efficiency. Weapons were charged, shields were raised, and final preparations were made. On the destroyer Yorktown, Captain Ryan Mitchell addressed his crew over the intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. You all know what we're facing. The Empire thinks they can scare us into surrender. They think we're just another species that will kneel before their power. They're wrong." His crew cheered, their voices echoing through the ship. These were men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. They were ready. In the asteroid belt, thousands of hidden drone ships waited in silence. They looked like ordinary rocks, but each one was packed with enough explosives to cripple an Empire warship. The Empire sensors couldn't detect them because they weren't designed to look for weapons. Disguised as space debris, Dr. Kevin Ross, the architect of the Sleeper program, watched from his hidden control center. "Remember," he told his team, "we only get one chance at this. The Empire will adapt quickly once they realize what we're doing. We need to make the first strike count." On the Empire ships, warriors from a dozen different species prepared for battle. The Saurians sharpened their claws. The Vorthan checked their energy weapons. The Nexari synchronized their hive mind communications. Each species fought according to their own traditions and methods. The Empire had conquered them all, but they still maintained their individual fighting styles. This diversity was supposed to be their strength. They had no idea it was about to become their greatest weakness. Admiral Zextar watched the tactical display as his ships moved into attack position. The human fleet was pathetically small. A few 100 ships against 50,000. This would be the shortest battle in Empire history. "All ships," he commanded, "begin the attack. Show these humans the price of defiance." The first Empire ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Energy beams lanced toward the human orbital defenses, and explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. But as the light faded, Admiral Zextar saw something that made his blood run cold. The humans were still there, still fighting. And they were smiling. "Captain." Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system, calm and confident. "Is that your best shot?" The Empire's first attack tore through Earth's outer defenses like a hurricane. Orbital platforms exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Defense satellites crumpled under the assault. Admiral Zextar watched the destruction with satisfaction. "Excellent," he said to his officers. "Their defenses are falling as expected. They should surrender within minutes." But the expected surrender call never came. Instead, Captain Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. calm and almost amused. "Admiral, you just destroyed about $1 billion worth of our old equipment. I hope you're proud of yourself." Zextar's eyes narrowed. "Old equipment? The stuff we were planning to replace anyway. Thanks for saving us the demolition costs." On the Empire flagship, confusion spread among the officers. This wasn't how conquered species were supposed to respond. They should be terrified, begging for mercy, offering to surrender. "Admiral," Commander Vexahol said nervously, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach." "Their confidence suggests. Their confidence is meaningless," Zextar snapped. "Continue the attack. Target their remaining orbital installations." But as the Empire fleet moved deeper into the solar system, something strange began to happen. The asteroids around them started to move not at first. It was just a few small rocks drifting out of their normal orbits. The Empire's sensors registered them as space debris, nothing more. But then the rocks began to accelerate in the hidden control center on Ceres. Dr. Kevin Ross watched his screens with growing excitement. Sleeper units are responding perfectly. The Empire has no idea what's coming. Colonel Amy Walsh stood beside him, coordinating the attack. "How many units do we have in position?" 12,000, Kevin replied. "Each one disguised as a normal asteroid. The Empire's sensors can't tell the difference." "Then let's give them a surprise they'll never forget." The first sleeper drone struck an Empire destroyer without warning. The ship's crew had barely a second to register the incoming object before it slammed into their hull. The explosion tore through 3 decks, and the mighty warship began to list to one side. "What was that?" shouted General Kethfer from his command ship. "Unknown, sir." It appeared to be an asteroid, but asteroids don't move at attack speeds. Before he could respond, another sleeper struck a nearby cruiser, then another, and another. Across the Empire fleet, ships began reporting impacts from objects that shouldn't exist. Admiral Zextar stared at his tactical display in growing horror. Red warning lights were appearing all over his fleet. Ships were reporting hull breaches, system failures, and casualties. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our sensors show nothing but space debris." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the debris is moving under its own power. These aren't asteroids. They're weapons." On the Liberty Bell, Captain Jake Morrison coordinated the sleeper attack with calm precision. Each drone was controlled by advanced AI that could adapt to enemy movements and find the weakest points in their defenses. "Target the big ships first," he ordered. "Let's see how tough they really are." The Empire's massive flagship ships, designed to intimidate enemies with their size, suddenly found that same size working against them. They were too large to maneuver quickly, too slow to avoid the small, fast-moving sleeper drones. A sleeper drone struck the Sovereign Dawn's engine section, and Admiral Zextar felt his mighty ship shudder. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. "Damage report," he shouted. "Engine 3 is offline, sir. Hull breach on decks 40 through 45. We're losing atmosphere." For the first time in his 300 years of service, Admiral Zextar felt something he had never experienced before: fear. But the sleeper attack was just the beginning. As the Empire fleet tried to deal with the drone assault, the real human fleet finally revealed itself. Captain Steve Baker on the Defiant received his orders and smiled grimly. "All right, people. Time to show them what human ships can do." The human fleet didn't fight like any enemy the Empire had ever faced. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, they moved like a school of fish, each ship perfectly coordinated with every other ship. Commander Sarah Blake led a squadron of fighters in a daring attack run against an Empire battleship. Her pilots flew in perfect formation, their movements synchronized as if they shared a single mind. "Remember," she told her pilots, "we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to confuse them, make them think we're everywhere at once. The human fighters darted between the massive Empire ships like angry insects, striking at weak points and vanishing before return fire could find them. The Empire's weapons, designed to fight large ships in traditional formations, couldn't track the small, fast-moving targets. General Cathar watched in frustration as his proud Saurian warriors struggled to fight an enemy that wouldn't stand still and fight properly. "This is not honorable combat," he roared. "They fight like cowards, striking and running instead of meeting us in honest battle." But on the human ships, there was no talk of honor. There was only the cold calculation of victory. Lieutenant Commander Nina Price, aboard the stealth ship Phantom, coordinated a new type of attack. While the Empire was focused on the obvious threats, her ship and others, like it, had been moving through their formation undetected. "Target the command ships," she ordered. "Let's cut off their communications." The stealth ships struck at the Empire's command and control vessels, disrupting their ability to coordinate their massive fleet. Suddenly, the Empire's greatest advantage, their overwhelming numbers, became meaningless when they couldn't communicate with each other. Admiral Zextar found himself cut off from most of his fleet. His communication systems were jammed, his sensors were being interfered with, and his ships were taking damage from enemies he couldn't see. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "We have 50,000 ships. They have a few hundred." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the outer solar system. It appears they have more ships than we initially detected." "How many more?" "Unknown, sir. Our sensors are being jammed, but preliminary estimates suggest thousands." Zextar felt his world crumbling around him. For 800 years, the Empire had relied on superior intelligence, overwhelming force, and the fear they inspired in their enemies. Now, for the first time, they were facing an enemy that had prepared for them. On the carrier Yorktown, Captain Ryan Mitchell launched the next phase of the human plan. The ship's massive hangar bays opened, and thousands of small craft poured out. But these weren't fighters or bombers. They were something new entirely. "Repair drones are away," he reported, "beginning battlefield maintenance operations." While the Empire's ships fought desperately to survive, the human fleet was being constantly repaired and resupplied by automated systems. Damaged ships were quickly fixed, weapons were reloaded, and fuel was replenished. Dr. Tony Clark, monitoring the battle from his laboratory, watched his theories come to life. "The Empire fights like traditional warriors," he explained to his team. "They expect a battle to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But we're fighting like a living organism. We adapt, we heal, we grow stronger." The Empire's formation, once so impressive and intimidating, began to break apart. Ships tried to regroup, but the constant attacks and communication disruptions made coordination impossible. Admiral Zextar realized with growing horror that he was losing the battle. For the first time in Empire history, their mighty fleet was being defeated by a supposedly primitive species. "All ships," he commanded, "fall back to defensive positions. We need to regroup and reassess." But the human fleet didn't give them time to regroup. They pressed their attack, moving with perfect coordination despite the chaos of battle. Every human ship and crew member worked toward a single goal. Victory. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty Bell, watching the Empire fleet struggle to maintain formation. His tactical display showed red icons throughout the enemy fleet, damaged ships, disabled vessels, and growing confusion. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're intercepting Empire communications. They're talking about retreating." Jake smiled. "Already? We're just getting started." He opened a channel to the Empire flagship. Admiral Zextar's image appeared. On the screen, his face showing shock and disbelief. "Admiral," Jake said calmly, "I believe you wanted to teach us about the price of defiance. How's that working out for you?" Zextar's reply was filled with rage and confusion. "This is impossible. You're primitives. You should not be able to resist us." "We're not resisting you," Jake replied. "We're defeating you. There's a difference." The communication ended, leaving Admiral Zextar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his mighty fleet continued to take damage from an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. For the first time in 800 years, the Galactic Empire was learning what it felt like to lose. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and Admiral Zextar could no longer recognize his once mighty fleet. Ships that had conquered star systems were now limping through space, their hulls torn open by weapons that shouldn't exist. His perfect formation had dissolved into chaos. "Admiral," Commander Vexahal reported, his voice shaking, "we've lost contact with over half our fleet. The humans are jamming our communications, disrupting our sensors, and attacking from directions we didn't know existed." Zextar stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what was happening. The Empire had studied human technology. For months before the attack, they knew exactly what weapons humanity possessed, what ships they had, what defenses they could mount. They had been wrong about everything. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the humans are deploying some kind of new weapon. Energy readings are off the scale." On the human battle cruiser Intrepid, Dr. Tony Clark watched his greatest creation come online. The Void Crusher was the Empire's most feared weapon, a device that created artificial black holes to tear apart enemy ships. The Empire had used it to destroy entire fleets, but Tony had spent 5 years studying captured Empire technology, and he had learned something important. Their own weapons could be turned against them. "Gravitational field generators are online," he reported to Captain Lisa Murphy. "We're ready to redirect their next Void Crusher attack." "Understood, Doctor. Let's show them what happens when humans get hold of their toys." The Empire flagship charged its Void Crusher, the weapon that had ended countless battles. Admiral Zextar watched with grim satisfaction as the artificial black hole formed in space, its gravitational pull beginning to tear at the nearby human ships. But instead of fleeing in terror, the human ships did something unprecedented. They began to move toward the black hole. "What are they doing?" Zextar demanded. "Are they committing suicide?" His question was answered when the human ships activated their own gravitational field generators. The artificial black hole suddenly changed direction, its destructive force turning back toward the Empire fleet. "Impossible," shouted General Kethvar from his command ship. "They cannot control a Void Crusher. The technology is beyond them." But the redirected black hole was already tearing through the Empire's formation, destroying 3 battleships before. The weapon finally dissipated. The Empire's ultimate weapon had been turned against them. Commander Sarah Blake, leading her fighter squadron, watched the destruction with professional satisfaction. "That's what happens when you bring a knife to a gunfight," she told her pilots. "Especially when we know how to use your knife better than you do." The human fleet pressed their advantage, using the Empire's confusion to strike at critical targets. But this wasn't random destruction. It was surgical precision. Every attack was calculated to maximize damage while minimizing human losses. Lieutenant Commander Nina Price, aboard the stealth ship Phantom, coordinated the next phase of the attack. Her ship and others, like it, had been moving through the Empire, fleet undetected, gathering intelligence and preparing for this moment. "All stealth units, this is Phantom. Execute Operation Backstab." Throughout the Empire fleet, critical systems began to fail. Engines shut down without warning. Weapons systems went offline. Life support flickered and died. The Empire ships, which had seemed invincible hours before, were now helpless in space. How is this possible? Admiral Zexstar demanded. Our ships are the most advanced in the Hesiod galaxy. Sir, his chief engineer reported, it appears the humans have been infiltrating our systems. They've planted some kind of computer virus that's spreading through our network. Dr. Michelle Gray, head of human intelligence, smiled as she watched the virus spread through the Empire's computer systems. 20 years of preparation, she said to her team. 20 years of studying their technology, learning their weaknesses, and planning for this moment. The virus wasn't designed to destroy the Empire's ships. It was designed to make them helpless. Weapons that couldn't fire, engines that couldn't run, communications that couldn't connect. The mighty Empire fleet was becoming a collection of floating scrap metal. But the humans weren't finished. As the Empire struggled with their failing systems, massive shapes began to emerge from the shadows of the outer planets. Ships larger than anything the Empire had ever seen, their hulls gleaming with fresh construction. Captain Ryan Mitchell, commanding the factory ship Forge, watched with satisfaction as his fleet of construction vessels revealed themselves. While the Empire had been focused on Earth's defenses, humanity had been building the largest war machine in galactic history. Admiral Carter, he reported, all factory ships are online. We're producing weapons, ammunition, and replacement parts. At maximum capacity, the fleet will never run out of supplies. Admiral Lisa Carter, coordinating the battle from her deep underground bunker, felt a moment of pride. This was what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They didn't just fight, they planned, they prepared, they adapted. Excellent, Captain. Begin Phase 4 of the operation. The factory ships weren't just producing supplies. They were producing new weapons, designed specifically to counter Empire technology. Missiles that could penetrate Empire shields. Energy weapons that could overload Empire defenses. And most importantly, they were producing them faster than the Empire could destroy them. General Cathvar watched in disbelief as swarms of human missiles tore through his fleet's defenses. This is not warfare, he roared. This is madness. They fight without honor, without tradition, without respect for the proper way of battle. But on the human ships, there was no talk of honor or tradition. There was only the cold, efficient business of victory. Commander Ben Rogers, monitoring Empire communications from his stealth ship, listened to the growing panic in the alien voices. They're starting to break, he reported. The Empire's command structure is falling apart. They've never faced an enemy that could match their technology and exceed their tactics. The Empire's greatest strength, their diversity, have conquered. Species was becoming their greatest weakness. Each species fought according to their own traditions and methods, but they couldn't coordinate with each other when their communications were jammed and their command structure was failing. The Saurians wanted to charge straight at the human fleet in glorious battle. The Vorthans preferred to use their superior firepower for long range. The Nexari tried to coordinate through their hive mind, but the human jammers were disrupting their mental links. Meanwhile, every human ship and crew member worked toward a single goal. They moved like parts of a vast machine, each component perfectly synchronized with every other component. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty Bell, watching the Empire fleet struggle to maintain cohesion. His tactical display showed a beautiful sight, the once mighty Empire formation dissolving into chaos. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're intercepting Empire transmissions. They're talking about calling for reinforcements. Jake smiled grimly. Too late for that. Nina, what's the status of Operation Blockade? From the stealth ship Phantom, Nina Price's voice crackled over the communicator. All Empire supply lines have been severed, sir. Their reinforcement fleets are dealing with technical difficulties throughout their territory. While the Empire had been focused on conquering Earth, human agents had been sabotaging their infrastructure throughout the galaxy. Supply ships had mysterious engine failures. Communication relays stopped working. Reinforcement fleets found themselves stranded without fuel or supplies. The Empire was learning that humans didn't just fight the battle in front of them. They fought the entire war, on every front, with every weapon at their disposal. Admiral Zexstar finally understood the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a battle for Earth. This was a carefully planned operation to cripple the entire Empire. The humans hadn't just prepared to defend themselves. They had prepared to win. All ships, he commanded, his voice heavy with defeat, prepare for emergency retreat. We cannot win this battle. But as his surviving ships tried to form up for withdrawal, they discovered one final surprise. The humans had been hurting them, using their attacks to drive the Empire fleet into a predetermined position. They were surrounded. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system, calm and professional. Admiral Zexstar, this is Captain Morrison. I believe you wanted to retreat. Unfortunately, that won't be possible. Zexstar stared at his tactical display in horror. Human ships had appeared on all sides, cutting off every escape route. But these weren't the same ships that had been fighting them all along. These were fresh vessels, undamaged and fully armed. How many ships do you have? He whispered. Enough, Jake replied. You see, Admiral, you made a critical error. You assumed we would fight like every other species you've conquered. You thought we would put all our forces in one place and hope for the best. But we didn't do that. We spread our fleet throughout the galaxy, watching you, learning from you, preparing for you. What you're fighting here isn't our entire military. It's just the part we decided to show you. The truth hit Admiral Zexstar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just defended Earth. They had set a trap that spanned multiple star systems. They had been planning this for decades, Ma. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Zexstar sat in his damaged command chair. Staring at the report he was required to submit to Empire High Command. His once magnificent fleet was scattered across space, some ships barely functioning, others towed by the few vessels that still had working engines. Of the 50,000 ships that had arrived at Earth, less than 30,000 were still capable of hyperspace travel. The rest were floating debris or had been captured by human forces. It was the greatest military disaster in Empire history. Admiral, Commander Vexahall said quietly, the High Command is demanding your immediate report. They want to know how. We suffered such losses against a primitive species. Zexstar laughed bitterly. Primitive? They made fools of us, Vexahall. Complete fools. He began to dictate his report, each word tasting like poison in his mouth. To Empire High Command, the human species cannot be conquered through conventional means. They do not fight like any enemy we have previously encountered. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of the Liberty Bell, checking on his crew. The battle was over, but its effects would be felt across the galaxy for years to come. Captain, Lieutenant Amy Brooks called from her station. We're receiving communications from 17 different star systems. Word of our victory is spreading fast. What kind of communications? Jake asked. Mostly from species under Empire. Control. They want to know if what they heard is true. Did we really defeat an Empire fleet? Jake smiled. Tell them it's true. And tell them something else. They don't have to stay conquered if they don't want to. In the deep command bunkers beneath Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter was coordinating humanity's next moves. The victory over the Empire fleet was just the beginning. Now came the harder task of building a new order in the galaxy. Ma'am, Colonel Amy Walsh reported, our stealth ships are reporting massive unrest throughout Empire territory. 17 conquered species have declared independence in the last 2 days. Good, Lisa replied. The Empire's power was built on fear. Take away the fear. and the whole structure collapses. Dr. Rachel Stone joined the briefing, carrying data tablets filled with psychological profiles. The Empire's command structure is in complete chaos, she reported. They've never lost a major battle before. They don't know how to process defeat. Their entire identity was built on being invincible, she continued. Now that's gone. Some of their commanders are talking about massive reforms. Others are calling for revenge attacks. But most are just confused and scared. On the bridge of his damaged flagship, Admiral Zextar received new orders from Empire High Command. He read them twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. They want us to return immediately for debriefing, he told Commander Vexal, and they're promoting Admiral Kethron to lead a new attack against Earth. Sir, with respect, Admiral Kethron has never faced the humans. He doesn't understand what we're dealing with. Zextar nodded grimly. That's exactly why they chose him. High Command thinks our defeat was due to cowardice or incompetence. They believe overwhelming force is still the answer. But as the Empire prepared for their response, humanity was already moving to the next phase of their plan. Captain Steve Baker, commanding the human frigate Defiant, led a small fleet on a very special mission. All ships, this is Baker, he announced. Remember, we're not here to conquer anyone. We're here to offer a choice. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Kepler system, home to the Altarian Republic, one of the Empire's most recent conquests. The Altarians had been enslaved only 5 years earlier, and their spirit was not yet broken. On the surface of Altair Prime, President Yera Moonwhisper received an impossible message. This is Captain Steve Baker of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to discuss your independence. Within hours, similar messages were being received on dozens of worlds throughout Empire space. Human ships appeared in system after system, not as conquerors, but as liberators. Dr. Michelle Gray, head of human intelligence, coordinated the liberation operations from her command center. Remember, she told her agents, we're not building an empire of our own. We're giving these species the chance to choose their own destiny. The Empire's response was swift and predictable. Admiral Kethron, commanding a new fleet of 40,000 ships, headed for Earth with orders to restore Imperial prestige. But this time, the humans were ready for him. Commander Ben Rogers, aboard the stealth ship Ghost Protocol, intercepted Kethron's communications weeks before the fleet arrived. Admiral Carter, he reported, they're coming back. But they're making the same mistakes as before. Good, Lisa replied. Let them come. This time, we'll make sure the lesson sticks. The Second Empire fleet arrived at Earth expecting to face a weakened enemy. Instead, they found a human force twice the size of the previous battle, supported by ships from 20 different liberated species. Admiral Kethron stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Where did all these ships come from? His question was answered by Captain Jake Morrison from the Liberty Bell. Admiral, meet our new allies. Turns out, a lot of species don't like being enslaved. Who would have thought? The second battle was even more one-sided than the first. The Empires. Tactics hadn't changed, but humanity's capabilities had grown exponentially. With allies providing resources and support, the human fleet was larger, better equipped, and completely prepared for everything the Empire could throw at them. Admiral Kethron's fleet lasted exactly 4 hours before he was forced to surrender. This time, there was no escape, no retreat. The Empire's second greatest fleet was completely destroyed or captured. As news of the second defeat spread throughout the galaxy, the Empire's control began to collapse entirely. Species that had been conquered centuries ago rose in rebellion. Trade routes were disrupted. Colonial governors found themselves cut off from support. On Earth, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Liberty Bell, watching. Ships from a dozen different species dock at the newly expanded orbital stations. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was leading that change. "Sir," Commander Sarah Blake joined him at the observation window. "We're receiving a communication from the Empire. It's not a battle fleet this time. It's a diplomatic mission." Jake raised an eyebrow. "The Empire wants to talk?" "Apparently. They're requesting a ceasefire and peace negotiations." Jake considered this for a moment, then smiled. "Tell them we'll consider it. But the negotiations happen here, on our terms, in our space." "And, sir, what should we tell the other species who are asking to join our alliance?" Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about the future. Humanity had proven they couldn't be conquered. Now they had the chance to build something better than an empire, a true alliance of free species. "Tell them the same thing we told the Empire," he said. "We don't force anyone to do anything. But if they want to be free, if they want to build something better than what came before, then we're here to help." 6 months later, representatives from over 200 species gathered on Earth for the signing of the Galactic Freedom Charter. The Empire still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self, reduced to barely 50 star systems and no longer able to threaten its neighbors. Admiral Zextar, now retired and living in exile, watched the ceremony from his small apartment. On a distant world, he had written his memoirs, warning future generations about the dangers of home, underestimating humanity. The final line of his book read, "The Empire thought it could conquer Earth by force. We learned too late that humans cannot be conquered. They can only be freed. And once free, they will ensure that no one else suffers the chains of slavery." As the ceremony concluded, Captain Jake Morrison addressed the assembled delegates. "Today marks the beginning of a new age," he said. "An age where no species will be forced to kneel to another, where differences will be celebrated, not suppressed, where freedom is not a privilege to be granted, but a right to be protected." The crowd erupted in cheers from beings of every shape and size imaginable. The Empire's age of conquest was over. The age of freedom had begun, and somewhere in space, on the bridge of a human exploration vessel, new crews prepared to venture into the unknown corners of the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as explorers. Not to enslave, but to invite. Not to destroy, but to build. The humans had smirked when the Empire deployed its fleet. Now the entire galaxy was learning why.